This podcast represents the opinions of the hosts of the Laugh Cry Club and guests on the show. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we share is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. Welcome back, everybody, to the Laugh Cry Club. I'm Joy.
I'm Rebecca.
I'm Chelsea, and if you are an imperfect human who laughs and cries, then this podcast is for you.
Welcome, everybody. So glad that you're here. We are 3 licensed therapists all over the globe. I love to say that because we're not really all over the globe. But we are 3 licensed mental health therapists and certified coaches. We are here to normalize the human experience. If you've been listening, thank you so much for returning. If you're new, welcome. We start every episode with a laugh and cry of the week and pick a topic for every episode. You can always find us at Laugh Cry Club on socials and email us laughcryclub@gmail.com if you want to submit a topic. But for now, Chelsea, who's kicking off the laughs and cries?
I'm going to kick off my laugh and cry. So my laugh was, I had my parents in town, my dad and my stepmom, and we had such a lovely time. And my dad and I will banter a lot, and my kids and I banter a lot, and we talk a lot of shit. And so we had been bantering all in the car. We dropped my dad off and my son at my house, and it's myself, my stepmom, and Charlie, my daughter. And Charlie's driving, and she's talking about boys, and she says something like, well, yeah, my hug count is 3. Now, if you're a teenager, or if you're not a teenager and you need to know, like, a hug count is like how many people you've hugged, like a kiss count, how many people you've kissed, and then it goes up. So she's still at hug count. She's going to kill me for this. So we get out of the car and we're walking into Walmart, and I think she's behind me, and I'm like, you little pervert. And it's not Charlie. It's a woman and her husband. And the husband just smiles and he nods his head, and she looks at me and she's like, yeah, that's about right. And they just keep walking. And of course, Charlie's like, Mom. And then my stepmom, who's very reserved, very like quiet, very conservative, she's just dying laughing. We are dying laughing, and this couple just keeps walking by like that was just normal. So that was my laugh, and I had so many, but I was fucking dying. And thank goodness for good humor people when I call husbands, wives perverts. And then my cry was, I'm healing, and I'm starting to, I think I talked about this last week, I'm starting to really move forward with my grief. My husband died 7 months ago. Yesterday morning, it's almost like healing made me feel far from him, and I never want to feel far from him. And I'm like, how has it been 7 months? And I sat down in front of his bedside table, which is unchanged pretty much. Like, the drawers, I have not gone through anything. And then basically there's like his ashes and candles and like his stuff that he used to keep by the bedside table. And I started meditating, just started sobbing, and I picked up his ashes and just held them and started kissing the top of his ashes, like in the box, and was just like, my God, I miss you. My God, I miss you. Then, I started going through his drawers and looking through his stuff. Like, it's like the last things that he's touched. And if you've lost somebody to death, it's like it's like you're getting these little tiny pieces, and you're like, it's just like you want to feel them. So it's like I was going through his wallet, and I was touching his credit cards, and I was looking at like his little receipts, and then I would put everything back. And then I was like, this went on for like an hour. And then I was like, okay, go back into meditation and close. Like, you've got to close yourself up. Because at that point I was crying and I was all over the place. I was clearly no longer meditating. And I felt like I had cried enough. And so I'm meditating and I'm holding his box of ashes, which is a pretty big box. And I'm just like hugging it. And I'm breathing and I'm doing my meditation. And all of a sudden, I bust out laughing because this ash box, there's screws on the bottom where you screw it in. Ashes are in a bag, it's screwed in. And I thought, thank God there's screws on the bottom, because I would have just taken the ashes out and started like touching them with my hands. Like, I was like, I don't know how I would have. I just was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And everything is right with you. What is wrong with you? And what is right with you? And thankfully the screws saved me. So then I just started laughing and I'm like, okay, I think I'm done meditating. And I just looked up and I felt so grateful. And I was like, babe, thank you. Like, thank you. And I love you. And I'm so grateful that we had this time. We had this time together. And my God, I miss you. So big cry. I'm still pretty tender. If you've gone through grief or you've gone through any sort of loss, there's really a hangover that happens. And so I was wiped out. Like completely wiped out. And it just exhausts you. It's just so cathartic and it's so exhausting, but it takes about 24 to 48 hours for your nervous system to reintegrate. So if you've gone through grief, just know when you have what I call like a grief surge, it takes that time. So I'm still pretty raw right now. And I know I'm working through, which I'm really grateful for. And it's a weird thing to be like, you're so like how like it's a weird thing to not want it to be far away and to be grateful to be healing. It's the both and, like 100%.
I can just imagine you sitting there and being like trying to like pry it open, but you're like, oh, I'm glad that these have screws on it. I just want to get closer to you.
That's how it feels. That's how it feels. So big laughs, big cries, lots of perverts, and I'm passing it over to my friend Joy, who might be a pervert, but you never know.
Oh my gosh.
You never know.
That's the thing. You'll never know.
We would have to call it out in public and see Scott's face. That's Joy's husband. What's Joy's husband?
Right.
This husband was like, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, he'd be a tell for sure. Well, my laugh cry goes together this week, and I went to a protest for the first time. Well, actually, no, I think I've been to a couple protests, but it's been a while. It's been a long time. The state of the world has been heavy. That is no surprise to anyone who's listening to this, I'm sure. But I felt very called to look up protests in my area. And you know that feeling you get when you're just kind of like, you're helpless and you don't know what to do. And, you know, there's no right or wrong way of how you feel called to help in this country, in this world. But that was just something that I felt pretty called to do. So I was looking up protests in my area and I found a few. And I was really struggling with the idea of going because I'm thinking the world is nuts right now. I don't even feel safe going to these things. Like this just feels really dicey. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to do some type of group protest, but I didn't show up because I was fearful. I don't need to explain myself. I'm sure everyone can relate to like the world feels really scary in groups.
Yeah, I was going to say in general, any groups can be really scary. Anything that is divisive adds another layer of you just don't know. Mm-hmm. You just don't know. I feel that, Joy. I absolutely feel that. Just even when I was in New York last time, when there's groups, I'm like, whatever's happening, it just feels very unsettling. There's some fear there. You just don't know.
There's one layer of fear around just social interactions if you're more introverted like me, but I'm talking more around safety of something mass casualty happening, right? And so I was talking to my friend about this. She sent me this video of a woman basically saying, a white woman basically saying like, hey, white woman, if you're afraid to go to these events, like not a good excuse right now. People of color live every single day walking out their door at risk or feeling that pressure of just existing in a world that right now is just extremely oppressive. So I immediately was like, yep, got it. Say no more. Like I'm showing up. And she also said, and you know who you are if you're listening to this, thank you for that, because it really light bulb moment, calling in conversation of that's something I really need to be aware of. Basically saying like it means more when white people are at protests. And the risk of being there is less as a white person. So I show up. I was really nervous, of course, but I show up to this protest in a smaller kind of town next to mine. I gave myself permission, which again, this is just like a little mind trick where I was like, if you feel unsafe at any time, you can leave. Like if you feel like your nervous system is going to a 10, you can leave at any time. Kind of like, Chelsea, what you've said when like after Steve died, like any interaction where you feel like I got to get out of here, I can leave. So I was just kind of telling myself, because there's this pressure that comes in of like, I got to do this. And I'm a bad person if I'm not protesting, like all that rhetoric. So I pull up to the parking lot and I was like immediately like, oh, I am here. It was just, the vibe was immediately like, I'm in. So I walk up to the table and I'm like grabbing the signs, I'm talking to people, and it was just like, I can't explain, like cute is the really bad way to explain it, but that's the only way that I can explain. Like the people were so cute. Like everyone, it was like women in their 60s and maybe 70s, mostly the older generation, like older than my generations, people who they're career protesters, right? Like they have lived some life. They're out there with signs that have been, they probably like altered 20 times, and there's music. And so immediately I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. I grab a sign, I'm hanging out, and I'm standing next to this couple. I mean, everyone's so welcoming too. Like you're just instant friends. They're talking to you, how you doing? But this couple next to me was like pretty quiet. It looked like a married couple. There was a lot of people who would honk and wave, but there's also people who drive by and just flip you off. And when I say flip you off, like the aggressive finger, and sometimes like the double middle finger, and they're just like, like they want to make sure you know they're real angry, like aggressive. So one time an aggressive middle finger guy drove by, and the guy next to me he just like very calmly says, I really hope he feels better after that. And I just started laughing so hard, because I was like, yes, like I really hope that he feels better. Like if you have that much rage that you're just like double middle finger to these like really kind, cute protesters, I'm so sorry that that's like the level of rage you have to deal with. But I just died laughing, because he's like, I really hope that guy feels better after he did that. So that was more of the laugh, and the cry was just the overall feeling of the community. And I felt so, we talk so much about like going small to get big, and I just felt this moment where I felt very small and present and grateful. It was a beautiful day. I felt very connected to my country in a way that I haven't felt in so long, which just reiterated how important it is to find your people. That this cute little lady was like, we had flags that we could wave around. She's like, we're taking it back. We're taking the flag back. And I was like, yeah, because right now, a lot of the times, myself personally, I see American flags and I think like, oh, it's the oppressor, because that's kind of like the narrative, what it has been over the past 8 years. And so it was just a cry moment. It was just a very, like, I felt so grateful to be back in, oh, this is my country. This is what it means. This is what democracy looks like. This is what freedom looks like. So it felt really good.
Joy, I haven't seen you this lit up in a long time.
It was great. It was great.
True.
Yeah.
I have not seen you this lit up in a long time. Look at you.
Yeah, I've had like some massive changes.
I feel it energetically listening to you talk and seeing you.
It's something. And I do feel, I know we've said this the past couple episodes, but I really feel this year turned a page. Like there was
I do too.
Something about 2026 like turned a very palpable page for me. So I don't know what that's about, but I'm really leaning into it. So
it looks good on you, Mama.
Thanks.
It looks good.
Rebecca, you're up.
Yes. Wow. Okay. I'm going to start with a cry because I want to end with a laugh. But my cry is kind of similar to Joy's, just the dumpster fire it seems like we're living in currently. Every day, it's just one thing after another is happening. And I know other people are feeling this too. But my biggest cry is, obviously all the ICE things that are going on, but is really about what's happening at the Supreme Court level right now about banning trans athletes from participating. And particularly they're looking at a ban on women athletes. It's so infuriating to me because people are just trying to live their life, love who they want to love, be who they want to be, and not bother a single person. Nobody's recruiting people in a locker room or sexually abusing them. Not these people anyway, maybe a coach is, but trans women or trans athletes as a whole is 0.01% of the NCAA. That is a minute, tiny speck And we, as a country at the Supreme Court level, are like trying to ban these individuals from participating. And particularly, they're focused on trans women, and that also includes intersex individuals that just want to play sports. And it's very scary and concerning that we are at this level of Supreme Court making these type of rules, because then it's just a downhill towards other women's rights. And it's just so heartbreaking, because I know so many people in this community, and these are wonderful people. Some of the best human beings I know. And it just breaks my heart that this is happening. Laugh. Gosh. Somebody said to me, a friend of mine said to me something about, I think they said something like, I don't know what type of business you're conducting or something. And then all of a sudden, I think I have a neurodiverse brain. I don't know if I really do.
Yes, you do.
You totally do.
What? We just closed. Okay, listeners, I'm going to go off topic. Rebecca's internet has been shit.
It has been shit.
So many tabs open that it started
there were probably 40
spiraling.
of them.
Yeah, what is it called? Buffering?
Yes.
It buffered and buffered 40 times. And then she was like, she has an open ChatGPT for every single thing she ever wanted to do. Yeah, maybe. Do we think there's some neurodiversity? Maybe. I don't know. I've only been a therapist for 20 years, but I'm gonna lean in. I know we're not supposed to diagnose our friends, but we love this about you. We love this about you, and we love you. And listen, we know when you're pounding crack Red Bulls on our calls, what's going on. We're trying to even out.
That's hilarious.
Not jacking up, evening out.
I love it.
Welcome to ADHD, guys.
I love it. Goodness, that's making me cry right now. It's so freaking hilarious. But anyway, somebody said something about conducting. My little brain goes to, conducting. I definitely want to conduct things. So I started walking around my house like I was a conductor of a symphony. And I was like, what's interesting though is I used to be in band in high school. So I started having all these memories flood back of being in band. And then I walk in the kitchen and I'm like, oh, Robin, my spouse is there. And she has a musical background too. And I'm like, I'm going to get a chopstick because that really looks like the little thing that they use. So I'm walking around the kitchen conducting, and Robin is laughing at me hysterically because I'm like, because the conductor will tell you to give you more from an instrument section, or they'll get you to go down. And then I'm turning the pages. It was a whole thing. All of a sudden I got lost in being this conductor in my kitchen. We were laughing hysterically.
I wish you could have a GoPro on Robin to just watch you.
Yeah, who cares about Rebecca's conducting? What's Robin's response? That should be the name of this.
She's in it too. She's like, yeah, you gotta get more from that section. And
oh my God, can you make a TikTok page? It's called What's Robin's Response?
Being Robin.
Robin's wife, Rebecca, does random shit. What's Robin's response?
I do random
does she
shit
join?
All the time. Yes, lots of time, yeah. Lots of time, yeah. It was so funny. So I'm walking around being a conductor.
Yeah, research on contagious
and then I
behaviors.
just was I had all these crazy memories flooding back. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when my band instructor threw a metal chair across the room once. And I'm like, and then she's like, I remember that too. They get really freaking serious. So anybody in high school that listens to this podcast, if you were in band, you know about the band conducting. Yeah. There we are.
That is so funny. Well, let's pivot into this week's topic. We are talking this week about generational trauma. And why are we talking about that? Well, because family patterns continue throughout generations. And you've maybe never heard of that before, but there's times when you might be like, have you ever reacted to something? You're like, this response feels like it's coming out of nowhere. Why am I responding this way? Maybe you see patterns in your family of I've seen this kind of carried on. Or if you've never thought of that before, start thinking about that now of things that you've seen carried on generation to generation. The important thing is to understand that generational trauma isn't about blaming family members. It's not about being I can't believe they did this. It's just when you don't have the tools, it's you do the best you can with what you have. Breaking generational patterns is starting with awareness of understanding it to go, and it's a lot of hard work because with understanding and recognizing, then you have to kind of break it open and start to do things differently, which as we've talked about many times before is not easy to do. It's not easy to just change behaviors, but awareness is such a beautiful, beautiful thing with everything that we do in our lives around personal growth. So It's really at the end of the day about freeing ourselves from that past generational trauma, behaviors, negative patterns.
I think a good place to start is to recognize that trauma affects biology. So your genes, like the gene expressions, like it's high stress and that alters it. So if you have a parent, a grandparent, somebody who had experienced trauma, when we look at the Holocaust and we look at survivors, you can see that the brain looks different. That trauma area is more vulnerable, even down to grandchildren. So there's a higher cortisol, there's higher inflammation, and then the nervous system responses. When we look at the response, which comes out behaviorally, that's where we're carrying trauma down. So like in families where there's silence, if you don't talk about it, then it's like we don't feel, we don't ask, we just survive.
Gen X, remember how we joke about that all the time, where we were raised to be like, suck it up, just move on.
Total.
Yeah.
So you stay in this survival mode, which in and of itself is traumatic. If we look at trauma and we look at survival mode, what does that look like? You're either fighting, you're flighting, you're freezing, or you're complying, which they called fawn, but I don't like that. I call it comply because it makes more sense. So you learn how to comply.
Yep.
You just go through life doing the right thing, following through. You have a big thing that happens and you buckle up and you keep going through it. Or we look at free states, which is like depression, right? Shutting down, dissociation, flight. That's massive anxiety. That's like hypervigilance. You're on edge. You're always feeling like the other shoe's going to drop. There's nervousness, there's worry. And I'm looking at these in the extreme when it comes to trauma. And then we have fight. We see this in kids. Any kid that's diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, that kid has some trauma. A kid's not just going around being an asshole, being defiant, right? There's a traumatic response happening. So what we don't talk about often comes out in these behavioral trauma responses. So if you notice that you're going to extremes, I'd be curious if you were my client. We look at that. We look at the family history and we look at what has been sort of passed down with unresolved traumas, and then how is the family coping. And then here's the fun thing is this is all treatable and healable because we have neuroplasticity, which means your brain is meant to heal and grow and change.
So another example would be like a parent develops some type of a neglectful or authoritative style and project the trauma on their child, because that's kind of like how they were raised. So then they project that onto their child. And as a result, then the child develops trauma from growing up with a traumatized parent. Those effects just continue to pass on. So it can look very different. It can really show up with like socioeconomic status. It can look like, different. It can look at like with substance abuse in the family, and kind of how that's passed along. I'm curious where you think a good starting point for people of like, okay, so I know this and maybe I recognize this, but how the heck do I start to change this? Because it really is so hard to break.
I think that's a great question, Joy. Like, how do we, when we're experiencing this trauma, or we recognize like, oh, maybe I do have some trauma. Like, what do I do about it? I think the biggest part of this is sharing it with somebody, like having someone else be of witness to your story. And this is like one of the key components of, say, like trauma focus, like CBT or any of the other trauma focused therapies, is about eventually you get to telling your story, right? Writing it out or verbalizing it to people. But being able to share it with someone, whether that's a friend, a spouse, somebody you feel close with, a therapist, a mental health coach, like somebody, just to be able to share it, because what that gives you is it gives you validation too. Like those people get to validate like, whoa, that was really some shit you went through. I think it also helps people recognize their worth, because a lot of times when you've gone through a trauma and then you're sharing it, you feel unworthy. I feel like if you can share it with somebody that is a safe person, like a therapist or somebody you trust in your life, they are able to witness this with you, but they're also able to see your self-worth, and it helps you then see your self-worth. Like they can mirror that back to you. Like, yeah, you went through this really terrible thing, but you are a worthy individual and worthy of love and affection and all the things still.
Something I see, you brought up a good point that I see often in therapy is people don't recognize it because that's always what they've lived in. So if you think of like the fish tank example where it's like if they're swimming in gunky water, that's all they know until you kind of like clear it out. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So a lot of people like live in that dysfunction, live in those patterns, and they don't really know any different because that's the normal. And talking to a therapist, if you're just not sure, talking to a therapist will validate. I've had plenty of clients where they'll be talking about a relationship with their mother or something, and they'll really minimize it. Be like, well, it wasn't that bad. And I'll really stop them and say, that is really bad. You never should have had to deal with that. You deserved better. And they'll kind of look at me wide-eyed and come to this realization that no one's ever really validated that for them, because that, again, is all they've known. So maybe you're listening to this and questioning that to be like, well, I don't know. This is like all I've ever known. And we see it especially with people who grew up with substance use in the homes, and, you know, the child really always had to be on alert, never knew who they were coming home to. That was always kind of like their survival skill. So we've talked so much over the year and a half that we've been doing this as well, of what we did our entire life is from survival. And then we can finally look at it and go, oh, I don't need to do that anymore because it's no longer serving me. And I think especially our audience being like 35 plus women go into survival mode. You caretake, you do all the things in your life where you're just kind of like, you were ignoring it, but you don't know you're ignoring it. You're just so busy. And then I think now's the time when you can kind of look at it. And I think there is a fear in that of, well, if I open that up, it's going to really take me down. But it's not. It's really going to get you to a place of being like, all right, now I can really take care of myself. And I don't always have to be in survival mode, or at least on alert status. I can start to really heal my nervous system.
Joy, I want to say too that, you know, that because I think that's something that we as therapists have always seen from our clients is this minimization of things. I personally minimize things myself. It's a coping skill. You have minimized because it has helped you get through life. And I do want to point out too, like if you're trying to share something about a past trauma, like you really do need to have coping skills in place. Like this is not a like go trauma dump on somebody about all the stuff that's happened to you. Like you have got to be in a place where you have some coping skills already. It's like, I'm thinking if I was, I recognize some sexual abuse trauma, some other sort of type of physical abuse trauma, whatever. Those type of traumas, if I'm just recognizing them, those are traumas like, yeah, I think you could mention like, I think this, these things happen to me and I'm going to go talk to a professional. I'm going to go talk to a therapist about those things because they need to help you make sure you have some coping skills in place before you go into a trauma story. But for me, I'm a therapist, but I've also had traumatizing things happen to me. And I'm recognizing at 50 years old, which I have done plenty of therapy work throughout the years, lots of it. And I'm starting to recognize like, oh my gosh, this thing that's happening to me is actually related to these other things that I felt were traumatic. I'm in a place where I already have some coping skills in place. So now I can share them. Like even with you two, I could come here and share my trauma story. And I would know myself that I would feel I have enough, say, coping skills in my backpack to be able to make sure I can self-regulate through that. So you want to be careful, and maybe you have to recognize where you're at. Do I have the skills to handle this and cope with it?
Right. And we have also talked about body awareness, where if you even are just sitting with how you're feeling, like starting with how you're feeling, what happens to you when you feel unsafe? Because we all do that. We all have those coping skills. When I feel unsafe, I will shut down, or I'll want to leave. I'll be like, I'm out of here. I kind of do the flee thing where I'm like, I just need to get away. And that's an interesting thing to just notice of like, okay, so why do I feel unsafe here? Tracking that, just a simple tracking, if that's available to you, might be starting to build that awareness before you have to like jump into the change, because change really is scary. We do not take this lightly. Generational trauma lasts generations for a reason. It is very baked into our DNA.
I want to go backwards a little bit. When we think about the beginning parts of healing always starts with awareness. You cannot heal what you're not aware of. And so when we're looking at sharing anything, that takes vulnerability to be able to self-disclose. So I think, pulling back, like everybody has a trauma story. A trauma story, if you are going to go into depth on that, that is to be worked through with a professional and somebody who has you build up to it to get to the story part. So we start with insight. So sometimes the insight and the vulnerability is sharing, like to Rebecca's point, like, wow, this thing happened with my mom. And then somebody goes, really? That's a little interesting. That gives you the beginning of awareness. So in families where there is secrecy, we are taught to not share. So just sharing, this is how I've been feeling lately, or I went home and I noticed this came up for me, or I noticed I'm having this interaction, this same sort of interaction. I would say getting very curious about what is weighing heavy on your heart, what is happening in your body, and noticing where you're defaulting into silence. And then when we go back to look at the trauma, we can also notice, where is there overreactivity? Like, where am I overreacting? Where am I really emotionally dysregulated? In trauma, all we see is emotional dysregulation. You're all over the fucking place. You're either a roller coaster or you're completely shut down and avoidant, or there's some sort of maladaptive coping, excessive whatever. There's like this negative self-talk happening. It's really like this survival mode. So if you can start to get curious, am I in survival mode? Am I saying these things to myself? Do I have these interactions with my family that give me the ick, or they make me feel bad? Start with that vulnerability and start to build that awareness by getting curious. We want to gather more information. We want to start looking. Now, I want to go into some areas that I really see that are disrupted when I work with people on trauma. Here's the things that I notice. They have a disrupted sense of safety. They don't feel safe. They don't feel safe with themselves. They don't feel safe with other people. They do not feel safe. Feeling unsafe is the default, okay? Their sense of belonging, they don't feel like they belong. They don't belong in their family. They don't belong in other people's families. They don't belong with friends. They always feel like there's a little bit of the outside, and that goes into trust. There's mistrust. I don't trust myself. I don't trust others. Again, these are like very fragmented attachments. And then we have self-worth, which is impacted, and we have intimacy. That intimacy is the vulnerability that I'm talking about. It's what Rebecca's talking about, is to start to share parts of what's going on with yourself to start to bring up that awareness. So if you notice these kind of 5 areas, and when we're looking at symptoms, if I'm looking at trauma, I'm like, you have this like 1000% of the time. Not sometimes I'm mistrusting. Okay, yeah, me too. Sometimes I feel unsafe. Well, me too. Joy just went to a thing, rally, protest. She didn't feel safe. Not the same as a trauma response. Trauma response is, there's no fucking way I'm going out there. This is very different. So we want to start increasing that awareness. And I say curiosity, and radically have self-compassion. Your parents, their grandparents, everybody is trying to survive. And when we go into survival mode, brain goes into default. It gets very rigid. And so, everybody's trying to figure out how to survive and come out with the least amount of being beat up as possible.
Yeah.
We're not thriving then. And
Right.
my goal for any clients I work with is, I always say it, fuck surviving. We want to thrive. Let's get out of survival mode and get into thriving. And that only happens when we treat the wounds.
Yeah. I'm going to double down on kind of what you said in terms of sharing, because there's a lot of shame in, I'm thinking of like how I grew up, right? I grew up in a very religious town where everyone wanted to be picture perfect. You don't share your dirty laundry. You don't, I think a lot of people can relate to that. And especially the generation before us, even, you just don't share that. There's a lot of shame. There was a lot of shame of couples being divorced, especially as a Catholic family. There was divorce in my family. Like my grandparents were separated, and that was very shameful. You don't talk about that. That's not something. So that is something that if you're in maybe one of those cultures, to know that is not shame. Like it's okay. I know that there's shame attached to that, and you're not alone, because that is something that universally everyone is dealing with, some type of family trauma. And that I also want to bring up, I see this with clients who are getting better / healing that generational trauma, where if depending on the family dynamic, if one person gets healthy, quote unquote healthy, or starts to really address it, family members don't like that because it forces them to look at their own stuff, or at least triggers that difference of like, well, so they're not doing this anymore. Like, where have you been? And like, it will really kind of kick up the dirt. An old supervisor, mentor, psychologist would tell me like it upsets the apple cart. And I love that phrase. It always sticks with me of like, you don't want to upset the apple cart. And that will upset the apple cart if a family member becomes healthy and removes themselves from the dysfunction dynamic, the trauma, the, survival mode that everyone is in. So to expect that, it's almost like things might get worse before they get better, because when you start to heal, others don't want to do the same. They're like, they rely on that part of you to be with them in that dysfunction. And that can be really scary and make it harder for change to happen for that person, because then they feel like they're abandoning their family dynamic.
That is a risk of therapy. And my informed consent, because I specialize in trauma, one of the risks is that it will disrupt relationships with your loved ones, because when one person changes, it does disrupt the entire family system. And that's a hard thing, to be the person who's wanting to call out something or to be healthy, or wanting, not call out, I don't mean it like that, but like acknowledge that there's pain in this family. That can be really, really, really hard. So just reiterating, there are risks. The payoff, when I look at, my own family, when I look at my own relationship with my kids, the payoff of healing your trauma, the payoff of learning from other generations and learning how to do differently, means that we're building new generations of healthy individuals. What else do you want to do as a parent? I mean, if you're a parent and you have little humans that you're looking after, what better gift to give them is to help them to thrive? And that comes from the parent doing the work so that they're attuning to their child, they're matching their child, they're talking about the things that they don't talk about. We are breaking the shame and silence connected to trauma. We're breaking that by acknowledging it. And guess what? It's a beautiful and messy process with a fuck ton of healing. If you can show up and do this work, that healing, when I look at my children, and I've been in therapy on and off for fucking 25 years, my whole life, I look at my kids and they're so much, they have emotional mastery. They know how to feel their feelings. They know how to lean in. They know all these things I didn't know. They're way better than I am by a million, trillion, gazillion. They've been through some shit, but they've learned how to cope through their own trauma that they've been through. And trust me, I'm their mother. I'm a therapist, but I'm a human.
Yeah.
We're all
doing
fucking
it.
up, guys.
Yeah.
We're all fucking up.
We're all
so
doing
we
it.
got to recognize awareness. I'm fucking up. What do I need to do?
Mm-hmm.
I send myself to therapy all the time. And go in and do it.
It's so true. It's so true. And I'm a big fan of exposure therapy, of just little bite size. If you're scared of even exploring what this looks like, even just recognizing, maybe this week you could notice one, maybe, or at least think about one inherited pattern that you might do.
Can I give a resource? Yeah, sorry.
No. So like I'll give one of mine. Like an example of mine is a conflict avoidant, like massive Catholic family, didn't talk really about any conflict. Conflict was not a thing. You don't fight. You don't talk about your feelings. Like, so I'm very conflict avoidant, and I know this about myself, and that is an inherited family pattern where that's step one. So people just want to stop right there, and they're like, oh, I know that I do that. That's all I need to know. I just know that. Like, that's great. That is a great step one. You're stepping into the awareness. That is an exposure to the uncomfortable thing. Then step two, like for me, taking it a little step further would be, oh, okay, so when I'm feeling something bubbling up, I actually need to say something. I can't just like, everything's fine. And that's still hard for me to do. It's still hard.
And I'm going to go even backwards. If you're curious if this applies to you, start learning about intergenerational trauma. Dr. Gabor Mate is one of my favorite trauma experts. Just start listening and getting information. If you're like, tick the box, tick the box, tick the box, tick the box, you might start noticing, hey, I am conflict avoidant. Hey, I am doing this. So if you're not even aware yet, because sometimes we're not even, our brain, this is the first time I've ever even heard of this. You can always get more information. That's my favorite go-to. I would say Dr. Gabor Mate is my favorite. But if you're going to learn learn about trauma, make sure you go through an expert, go through somebody who's actually has a license or actually, you know, an MD, a psychologist, a therapist. Gather that information. Let's not use like TikTok.
Yeah, don't use TikTok to diagnose or get your
No.
facts.
Yeah.
Please don't. It's great to
Yeah.
have like community. Use it maybe for community, but do not self-diagnose on TikTok. Don't take advice from people who aren't licensed professionals, or even just be wary that they're not your doctor. Even if they are licensed professionals, like the advice we give on our TikTok is just very general. Anything is not, you know, even on this podcast, not medical advice. It's something for you to really get an individualized treatment plan. So I'm glad you brought that up. But I really think that this is something that people can maybe have like a reaction to and start to feel uncertain. I'll link the Gabor Mate, one of his episodes, interviews on this show if you're interested in just kind of checking him out. Okay, so for next week, kind of going on the same train of family, we're going to talk about family rules and unspoken or unspoken. So taking this a little bit deeper of what were the unspoken rules, or what were the spoken rules in your family. Like I'm referenced all the time as unspoken was like, you just don't share your feelings. You don't talk about your feelings. You bury them. That's kind of like an example of an unspoken rule.
Gen X, did anybody not have that
I don't
rule?
think, I know. I was like, I think every Gen X person is just nodding in agreement here. So we're going to dive into a little bit of that. Just again, it's really all about broadening our awareness so we can kind of look at it. And I just find it so freeing to take things out, look at them, and know that it's not like stuck in your body. I can physically feel the difference of when it's like, what is this thing, versus like taking it out and being able to analyze it. And I think that's such a gift. So listeners, again, you can follow us on all the social platforms at Laugh Cry Club. Email is laughcryclub@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. If you have not yet left a rating and review, that is it's so helpful for other people to find our podcast. If you could just take a second and do that, we would so appreciate it. Until next time, we love you so much. Take good care.
Bye.
That's life, baby.